recording. Just settle in and hi, welcome. So hi Leah, nice to see you. We have so many people signed up for this Ask Me Anything. Hi Dee, nice to see you. Hello. We have a ton of people signed up for this Ask Me Anything tonight. But they're from all over the world, and so there are different time zones. So this is being recorded because a lot of people listen to the recording afterwards. So what I'll ask you to do is just turn your mics off or mute your mics, and unmute your mic if you have a question, just go ahead and just ask your question, and we'll make sure that that I see you and you get your hand up, and I'm hearing what you're needing. Let's see. It's interesting, Leah. And you all can have your cameras on or you can have them off. It doesn't matter because we're just all in this space together. So welcome everyone. Just give it a couple more minutes while a few more people come on. It's great. Let's see here. So welcome to this month's Ask Me Anything. We call it AMA for short. We do it every month. It's a monthly free webinar series that we do. We have just found at EQUUS that, we believe that a lot of courageous and authentic conversations are behind sort of the secret sauce behind eliminating fear and isolation and separation. And these conversations are so important, but we don't often get to have them in a safe space where we feel safe enough to ask the questions we want to ask, or we feel safe enough to just sort of be ourselves. And we've just found that if you're able to have these kinds of conversations and ask questions and be present for one another, it just makes us wiser as community members, as leaders, as siblings and parents and partners. And so this is why we were inspired to do our AMAs, a chance for us all to get together. And very often these AMAs are with me, and I'm really just an open book for whatever questions you want to ask. Oftentimes it's centered on a topic like it is tonight about running a small business, or other things around leadership, around culture creation, around anything to do with some of the topics that are associated with my book, around coaching. And often, though, we love to bring in speakers from marginalized communities, and to bring in people who represent members of the society who are often subjected to prejudice or bias or stigma or discrimination because of their lifestyle or their diagnosis, their belief or their disability or their social status or ethnic origin or gender orientation. So we've really opened the doors to our monthly AMAs to have more and more courageous conversations around and allow people to ask questions so that they can get to know the other, whoever that other is. A couple of months ago, we had a really wonderful speaker, Angelita, who is a member of the trans community. And a month before, we had Thunderbear Yates, who represents the Tewa people here in New Mexico. So they're really powerful groups. Hi, Mia, nice to see you. We have a lot of people on, but a lot of people who are keeping their camera off, and a lot of people who are listening to the recording later. So we'll just keep our mics muted if you could do that until you have a question, and then go ahead and open it. On that note, if any of you are asking questions that you would prefer that the recording be stopped temporarily, please let me know and I'll do that. And otherwise it'll be recorded all the way through. A lot of questions were sent in advance. So I have a whole plethora of questions that were sent in, which is great. They're really juicy questions. But I'm also going to make all of you a priority who are here on this call. So I have a poem. I thought to start this AMA with a poem that reminds me very much of the topic that we're going to be spending time with tonight. And those of you who've worked with me, you know that I love working with poetry. So tonight's no exception. So this is by a poet named Elizabeth Carlson, and it's called Don't Waste Your Time. Don't waste your time on earth doing the work of others. Do your own work, the sweat of your soul. The lightness in the center of your heart will tell you when you are on course. The sweetness of your breath will slow to match the tidal pull of moonlight. You will ski effortlessly down the slope of each day, calling your own name softly to the trees. So that's why we run our own businesses, so that we can call our own name. So I am just going to share a little bit about me to those who don't know me, and a little bit about my journey. And then I'm going to open the floor because your questions are way more powerful than anything I could come up with. So I have been working for myself since I was 23 or 25, somewhere in there. I started out in the corporate sector and just found that I wasn't a good fit there. I think I colored too much outside the lines, and I could make myself conform within the context that I was working, and I did a really good job, but I wasn't happy in my own soul. And so I had a little bit of kind of stress crisis and just knew I had to change course. So it's been a calling for a really long time. And I moved back to my hometown of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and didn't really know what I was going to do. Had to put food on the table, had to support myself. And somebody asked me a question, and they said to me, well, if you could be earning money doing anything in the world that you would want to do, what would that be? And at that time I said, well, I would be training horses and I would be teaching people to ride. And they said, well, why aren't you doing it? And I couldn't think of a good enough answer why I wasn't doing it. So I cobbled together a little bit of part-time work, and right away just started very, very small. Had one horse, talked to a barn. In those days, people were less worried about liability. They thought it was a great idea. They thought I could add value to their barn. And I started like that. I had one person on my mail list. It was my mother. And I immediately just started to flourish. It was scary. It was hard. I learned a lot of tough lessons. I was young and naive. Certainly I would look back now with all these decades of experience and see all the ways I might have done it differently. But the point was that I was, doing it. I also realized that I come from privilege, that I am a white woman, and that already allowed me some headway that a lot of people don't receive. And I want to acknowledge that. So my hope with my work is that I use my privilege to make the world a better place, to share the mic with others who have less of a chance to take center stage. And I went from the riding school to just kept following this thread of interest. And I have to tell you, it was never, loyal to, it didn't stay loyal to the small businesses that I started. So I would start a business and it would flourish and it would do really well. And then suddenly my passion would kind of take an abrupt left turn, and I'm interested in something else. And I sold the riding school. Lived overseas, found myself to be a single mom with two very young children, and needed to put food on the table, and needed to also have sovereignty over my own time because I had two small children. I wanted to be home with them. So I started a magazine. I knew nothing about doing a magazine. I knew not, except for a brief stint in college where I was doing some editing classes. I really knew nothing about publishing. But what I did find out is that if you're willing to reach out and ask people questions, there are so many people who are willing to sit down with you to mentor you. And so that's what I did. I just reached out to a copious amount of people and asked them to assist me to answer my questions, to help me figure out the questions I'm not asking because I didn't understand. And I was very lucky to gather around me a lot of sort of mentoring and support, and ran the magazine for many, many years. It's called Kindred, and I ultimately donated it to a nonprofit, and it's still running today. And I think the key to the magazine's success was that I was really following my passion. I was so keenly interested at that time as a young mother about what conditions needed to happen to raise a healthy, happy, thriving human being. And I wanted to look at it through many lenses, from education and childbirth all the way to what they eat and how they play and how they learn, and what happens with their siblings, and how are they influenced by the culture at large, and neuroscience. And so Kindred is largely responsible for a lot of what goes into EQUUS today, because I was I threw myself into so much research in the fields of human development. And I have to say, now I have a lot more understanding of how my business works and why it works and why it's successful. When I was doing the magazine, I could not tell you how I pulled it off. There was a whole lot of building the plane as I flew it, and going into wrong, kind of cul-de-sacs and having to turn around and come back. But I think that really it was that I really loved it. I loved doing it. I loved waking up every day doing it. And that was part of what made it survive, at least. So and then moved back here to the States, and knew that, the magazine was no longer in my best interest to keep doing, that there was something else wanting me. And this was when I started EQUUS, and that was about 10 years ago. And the rest, most of you know. So I have many questions here from other folks, but I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to anybody who's here now, who wants to ask a question.
I'll ask a question.
Great, Leah, thanks.
You said that when you were first starting that you were young and you were naive, and that you learned a lot of lessons along the way. So yeah. I'd be curious what maybe some of the top lessons you learned as a small business owner were that maybe stand out in your mind.
That's a great question. And I am really just I'm giving you these on the fly. I did not prepare with all kinds of possibilities with this. A really big lesson was that I'm very empathic, and I deeply care for people, and I would see potential in folks that they could possibly be a good team member. They could really help out. I didn't want to disappoint anybody, but I learned very much the hard way that you really need to hire for character. You can train skills, but you can't train character. Character is something that is innate. And so I ended up keeping a lot of people on the business that really I was just caretaking them and enabling them. And that cost the business money. And I subsidized a lot of, I'll just say, I subsidized bad behavior. I subsidized non-accountability. So that was one big lesson that I learned. And it's taken me many years to learn that one, because one of my Achilles heels is disappointing people. I don't like to disappoint others. And another one would be I had to learn to accept failure. So with the writing school, that was a really courageous act to open a writing school at 25 years old, because I'm holding mostly children, their safety, their hearts, their souls, their everything. I picked really safe horses. I somehow intuitively knew how to hold space well so that people could be safe. But I had 80 students from 8 to my oldest student was 75. And I had 5 horses, and there's all the possibilities that can happen inside all of that. And even though I think in all those years I had the riding school, I only had 3 accidents. And they weren't even that major. They were, a broken wrist or 2, and just, a hard fall. It was big for me to understand that I wasn't perfect, that I needed to respect who I was and what I brought, but also understand that anything can happen, and to set my clients up to understand that. So, how does that translate into a business that let's say what EQUUS is now. We're really clear with the kinds of clients that we take on, what they know they're in for, the risks they are taking, even though it's not physical risk because it's not a riding school, but they are going into the deep end of their psyche and their life, and things are going to happen. And so we try to create an environment that helps people understand what they're entering into, so that I'm, again, not carrying all the responsibility. We're in this together. And when I was younger, I was sort of wearing the responsibility of all of it. And that was pretty heavy for a 25-year-old. I think that's heavy for anybody, frankly, but yeah. Another lesson. Structure really makes goals happen. So you can set all the goals in the world that you want, but you have to have structure to make those goals actualize. So that structure might be, and this is just super broad brushstroke, but that structure might be, quarterly, profit and loss reviews, annual 360s where the students got to feed back to me, like just structures that you put into place that ensure that you are creating habits and routines that will actualize what your business to become, what you want it to become. You can't just sort of, okay, and here's another one. And this is kind of a big one, I think, for those who are independent contractors, and they're trying to figure out what is their value. So when I had the riding school, on purpose, I charged 3 times more than the other riding instructors. And I did it because I knew I was offering more. I just knew I was. I knew that I was offering way more experience than the average riding instructor. I knew that I was showing up with professionalism. And I knew that I was giving it 100%. I also knew that if I asked more, that my clients would give more. They would give of themselves more. They would show up. They wouldn't be late to class, in other words, because it's expensive. They would make sure that their child really did want to do the class because they were paying for it. They paid up front. There were no refunds. I learned this very, very early, to find a way to bring people forward to say a full yes to the work that they were going to do. And interestingly, I found people signed up for more. They were late less. They never canceled. They They were way more committed. There were less accidents because they were more present. Like the whole ecosystem got better because of that. And it also asked me to step up better. That if I'm, providing a product that I am asking a top fee for, then I really need to show up in all these little ways that don't cost me anything, except I need to show my integrity. So I try as hard as possible to return phone calls on time. I am definitely on time to my coaching calls. I'm not perfect at a lot of these things, but I work really hard to be sort of on point and responsive and there. And when I'm not, I know I'm not, and I need to own that. So it kind of calls me to be a better professional too. So I never forget, I had a friend who used to do a lot of private meditation retreats, and he hardly charged anything for them. And I asked him what that was about. And he actually said, well, this way, if I'm not at my best, they haven't paid much, so it's fine. And I thought, what a terrible kind of negative loop you're creating there. So, so what I'm kind of aiming for is the opposite of that. And I think there's a subconscious, at least in me, there was a little bit of a subconscious, like, well, maybe then if I'm not perfect, it's okay. If I charge less, then I can be less than perfect. But I found it's better to strive for better and to challenge myself to be better and more professional by adding value or requesting value of my services. So those are a few lessons that I've learned. There's just tons and tons more, but just off the top of my head, and more may come. Mia, and you wrote, will you speak of your calling in conjunction with your fear, those moments where you took the step toward change and how it felt? So if I understand your question, it's like, how did I maneuver with fear and my desire to move forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly you had the courage, because you spoke about it a little bit. You had the courage to put yourself in a position where you were unemployed and you needed to make money. And then, and I heard that you, in those moments, you're like, however it developed, that you found, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to spend my time. Mm-hmm. And then just a little bit about some of the prickly stuff that's in that space.
Yeah, it is prickly. Well, so I think part of it was that I had enough of a taste of the other way. I'd had enough of the taste. And I think some people have wonderful experiences in the corporate sector. And so it's maybe even more challenging for them when they do decide to strike out, because they've had great bosses. They've lived in non-toxic, they've worked in non-toxic environments. They've felt a lot of fulfillment, but they still want to, I think that can be even scarier. So the first thing that helped me was that I was in a very intense world. I was doing marketing for radio stations. I did 2 radio stations, and it was really intense. It was the day of MTV and a lot of cocaine, and my bosses were insane. And I was sensitive and wanting to do the right thing, and a straight A student, and it was just awful. It was just the most awful thing. So none of my fear could compare to the nightmare of my years in the corporate sector. So that was part of it, sort of right-sized the fear, because there was no way I was going to go back to that. I will tell you, there are still nights that I will wake up at 2 a.m. and go, what have I done? If I didn't have that, I think that would be abnormal. There is a certain existential aloneness to putting your whole self out there as a business. It's your heart, your soul, everything about you. And so it is a high wire act. And a lot of the fear was just what seemed to be very rational, kind of like money, basically. How am I going to live? How am I going to put food on the table? And when I first stretched into getting this place, there was literally a moment when it was either write the guy a check for the hay, which was, something like $1,500, or get groceries this week. I mean, it was literally, we took it some close edges. So how I got through that was I always knew I wasn't done. Like, things could get close and hairy, but I knew I wasn't done. And as long as I wasn't done, there was always a way. And what those scary moments taught me was a kind of tenaciousness to, okay, well, I'm just going to stay up all night and look for a grant. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, sell $3,000 worth of furniture out of my storage unit. I'm just going to do it. And what I found was that the more I put myself into that kind of resourcefulness, the more my fear diminished. So action helps to diminish my fear. And the more that energy of I'm going to do something about this, it seemed to create an energy of same. And so I would find, oh, wow, I applied for 3 grants and I just got a new client. So I don't know what they call this, but there is an energetic component to running your own business of pushing yourself into the universe, and something comes back. And sometimes that push is, hey, I'm gonna knock out 20 emails and ask 20 people if they want to join my wisdom circle. So sometimes it's that kind of pushing yourself into the universe. And sometimes it's, I'm going to spend that $6,000 on that horse footing, even though I don't have it. And it sends this message to the universe that this is going to work. And I tell you, every time I push like that, something comes back. And so it's a kind of beautiful perpetual loop of reciprocity, of pushing and receiving and pushing and receiving, giving and receiving. So that's how I deal with the fear. I kind of let it prompt me into action, some kind of action. Yeah. And in fact, I would say that's pretty much all I do. The only other thing is that I understand how toxic those thoughts are, and I can feel when the fear makes me a little bit shrink and get smaller, that the world responds to me in kind. And so I can't afford to let that fear have its way with me, because the world, it's sort of like the horse, the universe is just like a horse, and the world feels that. You may be walking around looking all like this, but the world feels you going, oh, I don't know. So, and, I tell you, in 30 years, I could say, yeah, I was way too bold. But at least right now, I'm going to say that pushing more inward, not backing off. And someone once said to me, who had many, many business mentors, and they said you do not want to feed the kind of energy that wants to back you off. So the kind of energy that says, well, maybe I should take a part-time job. Well, maybe I should just, cut some of these, expenses. There's nothing wrong with cutting expenses when it's done from a place of generative thinking and positive trust. But the kind of like, ooh, well, I better, that kind of energy is a very different cutting your costs. So there's a sort of inner game, an energetic game of learning how fear can fuel a boldness, and learning how much space you're starting to take up because you're feeling more trusting. And, and for me, there's been a kind of dance of sort of expansion and then contraction, and then watching how that contraction affects the business. And then, even though everything is telling me not to expand again, to push out again. And it feels very counterintuitive because, your neocortex is going, what? No, no, you're crazy. And who are you? And who do you think you are? And it's a sort of physics defying act, but that's a great question, man. Thank you. Does that answer what you were? Yeah, great. Cool. Yeah. Hi, everybody else who's joined. A lot of you have your cameras off. That's fine. For those of you who've just come on, we have over 40 people who've registered, and but they're from all over. So this is being recorded, and many people listen afterwards. So you're welcome to feed in your questions. Just put them in the chat or speak up. And if you don't want your question recorded, just let me know and I'll pause the recording. But welcome, everybody. Dee, do you have any questions?
I don't exactly, but I'm ready to do this. And I have my, seed idea, which is why I wanted to initiate the rest of my coaching lessons, because I was waiting for it I had to arrive here. I've been on an inner sabbatical, journey. So I don't so much, I'm just really enjoying hearing what you say about this, the energetic component of expanding yourself and putting yourself out there. And so right now I'm just taking it in because it matches what I'm feeling. And if a question comes up, thank you. It's a fair question to me. I'm sorry I don't have one necessarily. One comes out.
There's so many here.
But yeah. I really look forward to working on this, and I figured you'd be the best, such an honest, organic example of an integral and real way of doing this. So
thank you. Yeah. Organic is a great word for sure. If you told me in college I'd be a business owner, I'd be like, no, this is totally not what I want to be doing. So I have a whole pile of questions that people have written in. This is sort of related to me, but it's a fun one, so I'll read it. You obviously have a lot of overhead. Mm-hmm. Where do you find the courage to take all the risks that you do? So I do, yes. It's kind of astonishing, actually, if you knew the numbers, just to turn the lights on. And where I think where I find the courage is that I just know it has to happen. And I once spoke to a woman who's amazing. She actually invented the jog bra, and then she became a senator. And she and I talked about how we're given some yearning or some passion, and life wants it to happen. It's like you're born to be a tree, and so life is going to do everything it can to make you that tree. And so there's a certain amount of trust that, whether you call it the divine or God or the universe or consciousness, whatever, that they have a role, or it has a role to play in that. And so I a little bit partner with that universal force. And I say this in my book, there is a really clear kind of agreement I have with the universe that, I'm stepping up to this and I'd like support, please. But it's not a kind of like, oh, please, will you give me support? It's like, no, you made this whole passion thing happen, then you got to help. And so I trust the passion part. I do trust that. And even if I fail spectacularly, I will have followed my true essence. And a life following my true essence has been a life where every day, and I really mean this, I'm not overstating this, every day I wake up grateful, every day. And so it could all fall over in 10. Who knows? We could have 5 more pandemics. There are things that we could have complete unrest, political unrest in the United States. There could be all kinds of things that completely change my ability to run a business. But I will, in the end, have spent day after day after day with a fidelity to what I'm passionate about and what matters to me and what feels like a birthright. And so it doesn't matter to me if it fails, frankly. And I think that, I mean, yes, it matters, of course, but ultimately, if it fails, that is okay because of the life I get to lead every day. So that's where I find that courage. How do you grow from one person to more than one person? So growing from one person to two-person business is the hardest step. Going from 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 and 4 to 5. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full-time. I don't have employees. I don't run my business with employees. Everybody is an independent contractor. That's by design. They like it that way. I like it that way. but 6 of them are full-time. And the hardest step was going from me, the lone wolf independent contractor, to having a team. And that first step and who I hired was Stephanie. And that was the scariest. That was a big risk because it was a layout of money, things that I knew I could do, and now I was paying someone to do it. And I had never experienced having someone really there to help leverage my capacity better. So I didn't know what that would be like if I'd found the right person. And so that was a really big, scary leap. I'll tell you a story that one of my mentors told me that was really educational. So one of these mentors used to run a very well-known, famous restaurant in San Francisco, a famous seafood restaurant. And he and his wife came from the UK. And they came from the UK, and they gosh, at the time they were in their 70s. Now they're older, but they came to the UK in their 20s, and they wanted to run a restaurant. So they started a restaurant, and they lived in a little apartment above the restaurant in San Francisco. He was the chef, the bartender, the dishwasher. She was the waitress, the hostess, and some other thing I can't remember. Oh, bus girl. And so between the two of them, they ran this restaurant. And at some point, they really did it well. And at some point, it was time to hire somebody. And so he said to me, "Who do you think I hired as my first person?" And I thought about it, and I was like, "The chef?" Of course you'd hire a chef, you're a restaurant. And he said, "Nope, I hired the dishwasher." And I was like, "The dishwasher?" And he said, "Yes, the dishwasher," because I knew every little tiny detail of what it required to be a good dishwasher. I knew how long it took to wash each dish. I knew, the temperature of the water. I knew the rotation. I knew this, I knew that, I knew that. I could not only teach him to be the best dishwasher, but I could hire the right dishwasher. I could manage the dishwasher really well. I couldn't manage a chef. I don't know how to manage a chef. So the chef was the last person he hired. So it's a great kind of, for me anyway, and how I've run my business. I know other people do it differently, but for me, I hired someone who did things that I knew how to do really, really well. And respond to emails or answer a phone call or schedule the calendar or coordinate a retreat. And, she ended up doing it better than me. But that allowed me to kind of hone my skills on how to be a manager of somebody, because I didn't know how to do that. So how do I manage somebody? How do I manage them well? How do I mentor them? How do I let them go enough to just trust them? And I got to learn all of that with the first person. I have to say that even though having a team is such an enormous overhead, especially for a business like mine, and there are a lot of coaches that they don't have a team, they're just coaches. But what they do is they allow me to keep stretching further out professionally. So I am able to write a book. I am able to go and keynote speak. I'm able to be more creative with courses and classes and do the things I really love to do, like design coursework and curriculums and train people. Leah just got her received her certification, Leah, yay, and create that, coursework. And so that's what that team's allowed me to do. And so it's allowed me to add more value to my clients. And sometimes I look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Do I really need someone, doing this or doing that? And I do. Do I need? I want that. And what I also have found, which has been really delightful, has been this new, and I'd love to share this with all of you, this possibility to create culture. So now that we're many in the organization and we have team meetings and we have Monday leadership meetings, now I get to play at, wow, what kind of culture can I create? How can I make this company not only make other people's lives better, but also the lives of the people who are inside the organization? So we just recently created a document. I'll share it with you briefly. And this has been so fun because we're becoming, the company is starting to walk its talk. And to facilitate a company to walk its talk is very rewarding. It takes a while because you've got way more moving parts and lots more personalities. But we're starting to get there. And let me share this thing that I have here. 1 second. No, I don't want to share that. No, share. Okay, here it is. So you all are getting to see this for the first time, but we just created this as a team, and this is for the leadership team. But we, at EQUUS, we strive to create a working culture that is robust, skillful, mature, and fun. We endeavor to support our team to live a healthy work-life balance and to learn and grow as individuals so as to be the best human they can be. We are aiming to create a unique work environment that supports the EQUUS family to thrive and live lives of meaning and purpose. To add to this thing, Leah, that you, from your question about what I've learned, this is a new one I've learned. I now allow our meetings. I used to have very tight 1 hour leadership meetings, and we were sort of checking things off our boxes and, getting things done. Now I have opened that to 1 hour to 2 hours, because what I realized is that if EQUUS is going to become the organization that it, that if it's going to walk its talk, I have to allow people to process. I have to allow there to be time for emotions to come up. I have to allow for processing to happen. And so rather than it being a transactional meeting, we now have very meaningful meetings. And if stuff comes up, we handle it in the EQUUS way. And we encourage people to be vulnerable. We encourage them to be authentic. We encourage them to feel their feelings and to have strong boundaries and to practice healthy self-assertion and all of these things that people are learning inside EQUUS. And that takes time. And even though that was hard to carve out 2 hours a week for a leadership meeting, what's happened is that people are growing. And when they grow, they become better professionals. So that's been really fantastic. So these are some of the things my team gets as being part of the leadership team. They have a team trip where they come here on retreat to see each other. We are very pet friendly and parent friendly because people have children, and we want to be very much mindful of being open to that kind of lifestyle. We offer extremely flexible schedule and shame-free, judgment-free space, and children and pets are around. We just kind of keep all that really functioning. We have a flexible work schedule. We do quarterly challenges where the team has a quarterly challenge, like, walking every day or journaling every day. It changes quarterly. We have fun with that. I do not monitor work hours at all. I just trust everybody. Unlimited professional and personal learning through EQUUS, so they can take all the courses. I donate to a choice of charity every year. They get unlimited gear. They get complimentary coaching. They receive complimentary coaching from me. They can work anywhere, from anywhere in the world. We have meeting-free days, which are Mondays and Fridays. That has just started, so that people can spend Mondays and Fridays actually working without being interrupted. Makes them more productive. We have a wellness budget, biannual company-wide sabbatical, and unlimited vacation. So we'll see how all that goes, but we're excited. But it's fun when you start building a team, that you can start building a culture, and that they get excited by that as well. Any more questions from anyone before I ask another that came in? Okay. Somebody said, what about a business plan? So again, this is the way I do things. This may not be how other people do things. It's terrific to have a plan. I think the best advice that I received that I liked the most was from the founder of the magazine Fast Company, Alan Weber. And he said to me, no more than 2 pages. I was like, no more than 2 pages. He's like, yeah, no more than 2 pages, because things are going to change, and they're going to change fast. So have an idea about some projections financially, have an idea about your strategy, about whatever that strategy is, your marketing strategy or your product strategy. You need to be very clear about your point of difference. What's your big idea? Is what he said. What is your big idea? And stay focused on that big idea. And what makes that big idea of yours different from everybody else's? I would say that a lot of us who are entrepreneurial are very creative. And so if you're anything like me, you might have a million ideas. Find your core purpose, your core, like why people want to be with you. And what that does is it allows you to, that's sort of like the trunk of your tree. And if you really laser focus on that and stay laser focused on that, the branches of other things that you may do will branch off of that, but it will never splinter your core focus. So you want to get that first, and you want to get crystal clear about that. For me, I even went on retreat to find out what that was. I went on a leadership retreat with Rockwood, and part of the exercise was to get crystal clear about your purpose. And you got feedback from people, and it was all very uncomfortable. But mine is that I create conditions for transformative learning, and I use nature-based principles to help wake people up to their higher purpose. That's it. That's the thing. There are a lot of things I want to do, but it all has to stay on that key kind of bright point. So that's been some advice I've received recently, and I think it's important. So I'll share that with you as well. How do you build a positive culture of meaning and purpose, of feeling valued? So I spoke about this a little bit, about allowing for there to be time. Everything is relationship. And so, you're dealing with human beings, and to build a positive culture inside the work environment takes time. It takes slowing down, having one-on-one conversations, picking up the phone instead of, throwing it an email. We have a policy in the company, which is fail and fail fast. And because you learn so much from failure. So I think we've become less failure averse in EQUUS and more because everyone's starting to realize I get upset if, the same thing happens 3 times in a row, even after we've addressed it. Then it's like, yeah, no, something has to happen. But failure is seen as an opportunity. And I really mean that. That's not lip service. We sit down, we go, wow, this went wrong, this went wrong, this went wrong. How did that happen? Not from a blamey, shamey, who did what, but just like what broke down, what wasn't in place, what might we want to put in place, how could we make this different, what needs to shift. And that failure welcoming climate allows people to be more accountable, to show up more authentically, to say if they really can or can't do something. And that's important because then we can hand that to somebody else. We teach people that the answer to can you do this for me is not yes. It may be yes, but it's yes, or yes, but with these conditions, or no. And that way we get real responses about what people will do when they've got a task. And also that we have very clear follow-up. Yes, I will do this by then, instead of just yes. So I've had to watch things like, just for my own leadership style, not saying we need to. It's who's doing this, when will it be done by, how will you be accountable to it? Just be very clear with those kinds of things. This is just a little fun one. This is just for fun because we're starting to wind down, but we have in our leadership meeting an agenda item called the too hard basket. And you know how you have these things where they're not hard, but you keep putting them off because it's just become like, for some reason, it's impossible to do. And it's not because it is hard. It's just, I don't know, it's just hit that place in your psyche. So we have what's called the too hard basket, and it can, so, Emma, who's in charge of all the marketing, she'll have something in her too hard basket. Someone else will say, oh, I can handle that for you. Because it's not necessarily so marketing relating that the other person couldn't do it. And this just relieves so many log jams. It's crazy. So that's a really fun one. And it, keeps things moving and flowing. Gen Zs are amazing to work with. I cannot recommend them more highly. I have received so much reverse mentoring from my Gen Z team. It's been humbling. So yes, I'm mentoring them a lot, but the Gen Zs are switched on in ways that are very relevant to the workplace right now. And they are smart and committed and have a great sense of social justice, and a sense of that a company needs to sort of be accountable and make a difference. And they see the world in such a different way that's really refreshing. So hire some Gen Zs. How do you tell the difference between fail forward and something not working needs to end? I've been hearing about organizational failure to sunset, clinging instead of letting go, speaking of nature-based principles. That's a great question. When we're failing forward, there is a sense of generativeness. There's a sense of learning, and there's a sense of expansion. When something's just not working, so here we are back to this energy feeling, right? About sort of the energy of working. When something's just not working, it feels like barnacles on the hull. And it feels like the energy is kind of sinking and dying. And we experience this a lot on the ranch because, the ranch, the land, the animals are constantly throwing us curveballs. And so things can happen, things can break down. But there's a kind of energy of moving forward and getting through, and there's a sort of levity to it. We've also had experiences where certain individuals haven't had the character to be able to handle certain things, and that kind of failure is, it's either sabotage or it's just not the right fit, and that energy is completely different. So, you know, without trying to sound too vague, it really is an energetic difference, but it's a great thing to pay attention to. Yeah, so I hope I've answered your question. Yeah. So we are coming towards generative versus barnacles. Yeah, great. That's great. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Yeah, barnacles have a feeling on the whole. So, and those are, you know, those are fun, those aren't fun to have to scrub off, but it's important. And, you know, this is kind of back to some of the principles of the horse herd, and the leader of the horse herd, her choices are about care of the whole. And so your business is an entity that's a whole, and your decisions have to benefit the whole. Yes, there's care to individuals, but ultimately you have to care for the whole, because everyone who's on that, who's in that herd, the clients, the land, the staff, the team, your vendors, your key stakeholders, all these, they're all impacted by what happens with the whole. And so sometimes we have to make difficult decisions because it will benefit the whole. It will, and I often try to speak in terms, even when I speak, when I'm speaking to someone that I have to let go, or that I have to sort of mentor or change something that's happening for them or that they're doing, I try to speak from the business's point of view. So instead of saying I need, or you know, for me this, I say the business needs. That's really good for my brain as a leader, because it reminds me that I'm working on behalf of the whole, that I'm in a servant leader position and I'm to serve the whole. And so I will, and then I think it helps the brain of the person I'm speaking to as well. So they understand this really isn't personal, even though it feels incredibly personal. It's really about a bigger picture. Yeah. So with these last 3 minutes, I do want to say, I have a wisdom circle that I've just started. It's a very particular wisdom circle. It's a women's wisdom circle, and it is specifically for women who are professionals, who are either in the process of running their own business and want to sort of take it to the next level, or are wanting to start out with their new business, but they're really invested in making the rubber hit the road, seeing some change happen, making things happen, achieving some goals. And we have 4 places left. The women who are in the wisdom circle are very accomplished and super go-getter women, but amazing women also, and amazing women, but meaning that they're sensitive and kind and, you know, just, you know, like everybody at EQUUS. So that's happening. So please reach out to me if you are interested in being in a member of that wisdom circle. There's only 8 spaces total, and that's a 6-month engagement. And please consider doing some coaching with me. I love helping people manifest their dreams and get really clear about their purpose and make things happen that they didn't think were possible. So I would really love to work with you if that is something that you're thinking you'd like to invest in for yourself. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for joining. And any last words, anyone, before we say goodbye? Oh, thank you, Karen. Karen said she's teaching sections of Flying Lead Change at UMass Amherst this fall. That is so great. Thank you so much. That's terrific. Yay. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for being on. Have a beautiful night. Bye-bye.